Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special Sculptor's Q&A. And I love it because we have two Tobi cams.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because of the angle of the A9 while you're building
Oh yeah.
is just gonna be funny.
Yeah. I'm
But hello. So we've got Eli, we've got Tobi, and myself. We're gonna be here for the next about hour and a half. We're gonna talk everything Starforged sculpt wise, but we're also gonna talk about sculpting in a larger format, in a larger way. We're gonna go to the heart of things. As we could maybe who knows we may not have time. Um, but first and foremost, welcome. And if you are just joining us for the first time in none of our streams, we are doing a stream pretty much every weekday for Dwarven Forge while we're in our current Starforged campaign. Um, the sound is off for you. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, not certain why that's happening. Um, but in the larger whole, we will have no stream tomorrow. Our kill team game got canceled just because of some scheduling things and some of the other things that were kind of taking too much weight to accomplish that we couldn't also then do that game tomorrow. Unfortunately, we are trying to also still accomplish that. We still want to play it. We still want to show it off. We still want to show it with Starforged. So that is the plan. But as Chris is currently at Adepticon, we're having to kind of wait a little bit before we can have the discussion about how we're going to shift it and in what way. So as soon as we have that news, we will give it to you. It may run the similar to our Nemesis build, where we'll play Nemesis and record it and then release it between now and Pledge Manager. Additionally, our team is at Adepticon, so we have Chris, Mace, Hamster, and Nate out at Adepticon right now, and they are at booth 703. If you are out there, probably not. Anybody who's watching this is if they're at that con, they are doing something. But if you end up going over this weekend, that is where they'll be at. They are showing off Starforged terrain as well as a couple of other biomes. I think Wildlands is there. They've got a big, castles into dungeons into Wildlands build on the table as well. So you can see a couple cool things there. As well as I think they have a little fun thing that they're trying to do while they're at the convention. Last but not least, supply cache reveal is tomorrow, Friday at noon. Keeping in pace with every Friday, we're revealing another supply cache in full. So these supply caches are basically boxes that in the Pledge Manager you will be able to add to your purchase if you've spent $500 or more. Every $500 you'll get a supply cache, and then at a $2,000 entry you'll get an additional one, a bonus free cache. So these are just extra pieces. There are 4 in total that we will be. The last one will be revealed next Friday, and so they are built to be extra pieces for your collection. These are ways to get, if you just need a couple more floors or you just wanted a couple more energy units or something, whatever's in these caches, and they speak to you, then great, then you can pick that up, and as long as your pledge meets the value. How that works is once you end your pledge here in the campaign, we will then enter Pledge Manager. At the end of that first round of Pledge Manager, we will total everybody's pledge totals, and then from that we will open the Pledge Manager a second time so then you can actually make your selections, because it is based on the total you spend in both campaign and Pledge Manager. So some people have, hey, I can only spend this much now, but I'll spend this much later. We still want to honor that and give people the things that they deserve. I believe that should cover everything that we really needed to talk about at the top here. If you have any other further questions or any other issues, our comment section on the GameFound page, Discord channel is also very active, and we also have great mods like Finley Shards out there helping, and we also have some bug report stuff in there. If you're having an issue with the GameFound, there might be a solution there, or there might be a solution in our FAQ section on the page. And failing any of those things, you can also reach out to our customer service department and we will do everything in our power to help you out. Tonight, we will also still be giving away a $50 gift card. Now, the gift card can be used in the web store and on the current campaign, but the current campaign pledge manager, was what I was needing to clarify. It's not during the actual current campaign at this moment. It is only in the pledge manager phase. You can use this gift card for that. That will be a drawing that we'll do in a little bit. We'll probably do that about 7 o'clock. We're thinking this is probably going to be about a 90-minute stream. But yeah, we'll try to do it around 6:50, 7 o'clock. And then we'll do a drawing there, and then we'll keep going. All right. Basis of this conversation. We've got our two sculptors of Starforged. They're going to introduce themselves here in just a minute. And we wanted to give a chance to have them answer questions by you, the backers, as well as just kind of talk about Starforged creation and Starforged design. And then on top of that, pardon me, I also just kind of wanted to talk about sci-fi influences, inspirations, things that they actually take from sci-fi, what they like about it, why the genre was fun to either fun or challenging or both to participate in. And additionally, we've got some questions already from people from the Discord, but you are more than welcome to add questions in as we keep going. I am watching the chat, so if there's something you want to say or something you want to bring up, I'm happy to bring it to the attention of the other two on board. So Eli, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first, and then we'll go ahead and introduce Tobi, and then we can get started.
Sculptor, Forge, and I also do some design, some writing, some occasionally run a one-shot when I'm in town, that kind of thing. And yeah, what else do you need to know about me? Too much, I guess. That will do for start.
I think that's good. I think that's, yeah. Shoot. Why is the... Huh. Is it because... They're just saying you're super quiet, that's all. So I'm just trying to make certain. Give me a moment. Let's try that. Go ahead and do that again, Eli.
Do that again, Eli. Yada yada, sound, noise, typical boring level, louder, better, quieter. How's it go?
Yeah, well,
That...
all right, that's much better. Okay,
cool.
I think it just was, yeah, just a weird sort of
Okay.
balance issue. All right, so
I mean, I
if
can
you
yell
if you
more
don't
too,
mind
but-
saying that all again, just real quick, Eli.
Saying that all again, just real quick, Eli.
Yeah.
Did that work? Yes.
Yeah, that worked
Okay,
great.
cool.
Thank you.
Okay.
Eli, you've also sculpted about like 80% of the Starforged line too. Like there was a lot of those things that were just like constantly iterating and things. So yeah, definitely lead sculptor on this project by a Martian.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go ahead and hand it over to Tobi.
Hey, I'm Toby. So I'm also a sculptor on Starforged. Eli did all the core pieces, and he did most of it, but I did some of the pieces here and there, and
I mean, you did quite a bit of the accessories in terms of
Yeah.
like with the turret, the cone, or I guess the base.
Yeah.
There was also, correct me if I'm wrong, Eli. Did you have any hand in that original parts of the catwalks design?
Toby did that cool, the ramp.
That's
I
right.
did the
Yeah,
ramp,
the ramp.
so yeah,
I
Eli
was gonna
did
say
the-
like he did the ramp. I just wasn't certain if you had more to play. But yeah, that ramp design is really great, and that took a little bit of effort too, just trying to make certain that our tolerances were right. And you were the first one to be like, well, why can't we make it a hook, and why can't we do? Because we were even at the start, we had been thinking about how can we make a really cool ramp and make this part of this like system and include biscuit hole and biscuit pegs and stuff. So great. The first question I actually would love to bring up to both of you, and just kind of whoever wants to take it first, is there's the question from the Discord that I think is actually really interesting in terms of sculpting in general, which is the idea of when we're creating a modular system, making the pieces line up, right? From concept to sculpt to then potentially like factory production, right? Like how we keep them lined up, not only within sizing, but then within the design itself, like how you took the pipelines within the core pieces and made sure that they were all lined up, and things like the pull accessory holes on a lot of the accessories, and even with the dome itself, like figuring out where the connecting points would be strongest and how you would actually have to form around them. I think this was an interesting question to me anyway. If either of you want to start.
Sure.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah.
Eli? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll just mention, if anyone hears some funny noises in the background, I've got a 1-year-old who's up to her hijinks. But I don't think it's going to come through. So anyways, that's what it is. I haven't got a tauntaun in the background or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I think just making sure things line up and sizing and so on is something that we've gotten increasingly sophisticated about over the years. It was relatively seat of the pants in the early
Yeah,
days. Back in people, longtime backers who have some of the resin sets know that not everything lined up perfectly back in the day. So we initially start out generally by trying to just kind of solve our basic geometry puzzles. We have an idea of what we want a set to do, and we will start by making mocks of things, which for a long time, Nate would be doing a lot of that using pieces of foam that he would cut and patch together and just be like, I want a thing that does this. It's going to look kind of like this. And we'd kind of bounce the ideas around. Nate did a lot of that. Toby and I and whoever else, Michelle, make things out of, maybe cardboard sometimes. A lot of it can be done just with graph paper and sketching, of course. I think that's what Stefan largely did in the ancient days. That was fine, but particularly as you're starting to move in 3D, in other words, you want things that work vertically as well as horizontally, and work maybe at half steps and so on. You have to kind of keep revisiting things, and that gets trickier and trickier as as you add more complexity, and particularly if you have, say, a science fiction set where you want maybe pipes to connect from one piece to the next, and also you want something to be able to flip upside down and look good against the thing. So
that was the one that I was gonna say. It's like I think in general, you're exactly right. Also about our sort of like there's imprecision, there's imperfection in hand sculpted stuff that innately we also cherish, and it's part of the charm. And there's such a dedication to the blocks, both from Miles and from you and from Toby and from Michelle, that when we actively sculpt in clay, there's a lot of innate precision that comes in it because of experience and talent. And that just kind of ends up being this thing to me that creates a funny conundrum where when we're working in 3D, we have more control over it. We have more of a precision in terms of like, yes, I want an exact 2-inch line, but then when we're so blown up on something and you're like, I'm gonna make this thing, and it's a great little curve, and it's like, oh, I measured it. It's 0.15 inches. I don't know if that's gonna come up, and like it creates this like things are lining up, but maybe this detail is so small that it's better to adjust the design or to blow it up just a little bit more, and the line will actually be more confident when they match up. And then the 360 part was then yet another challenge, right? We can make something work in just standing up basically, but when you then have to flip it over and make certain that now this other part of the design, like the pipes that you put on the bottom of the core, right? If we had just had to have that terminate to the floor, it'd be less of a deal. And I don't know if we would have even done those pipes then, because it would have been like, the beauty of the things on the edge there is that it fully wraps around the piece. And so you get like when you flip it upside down, especially on that corner, you get the things as they like bend around, and it makes this like really clean additional design between the straight walls and the corners and the diagonals, and everything kind of just matches up in a really neat way.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was something that, to kind of carry on from where I left off, we, now that we're working with, now I should say this is now specifically for the science fiction set. This is not like a wholesale switch that we've done in perpetuity, but for the science fiction set, we decided to work digitally for our sculpting
Yeah.
because when you're making pieces with mechanical precision, sort of essentially superhuman precision, things that machines can do that artisans, I mean, we can do stuff like that. I mean, I've done some very precise stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
trying to do it as quickly as I could do it digitally
Yeah.
and with the ability to iterate it, that just isn't possible. No.
Yeah.
And it would be silly to try. So it's the difference
And
between
and the
mechanical
consistency
precision.
too, right? And the
Yeah.
consistency of the thickness of something versus, you know, copying it to another thing and having it to carry between each object, I think is also helpful.
Yeah, if you want perfect circles, you want perfect octagons, and so
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
I mean,
Or
for
even
sorry,
no, you're good.
for something that's made by an artisan, you know, a medieval building made by a stonemason or a carpenter, um, I I think having an actual artisan make that thing is good because, you know, like me or Toby or Michelle or whoever is striving toward perfection, not quite getting there, but getting, you know, doing what an artisan can do to make something as nearly perfect as possible
Yeah.
is appropriate for a thing that would have been made exactly that way, you know, a stonemason trying to
Right.
carve something perfectly,
Right.
you know. But when it gets to the point where, yeah, you're like, these are mass-produced pipes on a spacecraft, no dude with a chisel was sitting in a corner for 20 years making them round,
Yeah.
you know, it's silly to do that. So the fact that we're doing this digitally meant that we could use digital models to test things in a, you know, a very sophisticated way where you can spin a thing 380 degrees or 270 degrees or
Right.
whatever, try all the options.
Right.
And that allowed us to make things that interact in more interesting ways in some cases because I mean, you can do that if you have two physical models. You can, you know, take this one and take that
Yeah,
one,
yeah. Well,
push
and that
that one,
also
whatever.
became that's
But
another thing that always kind of stalls us anyways. Prototypes and how do we get there?
yeah.
So like this process also helps that, right? We can actually smash these things together. That's another dangerous thing that we can't do with clay.
And also another thing I liked with in the case with the digital stuff with you know, with both of us working on it, since I was doing some pieces that were like, you know, worked with for example the ramp.
Or directly referenced.
Yeah, I can
Designs
take the STLs that Eli finished up and
Yeah.
then like take the, you know, the silhouette or the section of the pipe to be able to, you know, directly use that or take some detail off of there to like have it fit in with the system without, you
Yeah.
know, waiting for it to ship over and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And like there's a lot of cool,
Yeah,
you know, back and forth stuff.
Well, and that was going to
Yeah.
that was going to be the thing I was even going to want to ask next was along the lines of was there something in how we had to develop this set that created a new process for you? I mean, obviously it's a different medium, right? So it already has an innate different like kind of workload. But was there something about how you're like, oh, I would never have thought of doing this when I was working with clay, but now that I have this, why don't I try it? The answer can also be no.
Yeah, I mean,
Just-
go ahead, Toby, if you want, or I can take it.
I mean, yeah, my main answer would have been something like that, what I was just saying, where like
Yeah.
being able to share assets and stuff like that. But like also what you were saying earlier with like, you know, the I guess you were saying it a little bit earlier, but like being able to like, you know, zoom in like as much as I want, is a good thing and also a bad thing in terms like sometimes like it's hard to see the scale, but it's also like you get to like put like, you know, sort of fine detail like and
yeah.
have it like, you know, be, you know, have full control over it and stuff like that. It's
The
much
double-edged
easier.
sword
Yeah.
of like I got so much detail and I got to put so much care into this one section, and then I'm zooming out and I'm like, oh, that's 20% of the piece. I got 80% more to go. I gotta.
Yeah, but yeah, also another thing I liked a lot was like, you know, being able to have all the process of the work on the same, like, you
On
know,
the same, yeah.
so I can like, you know, when I'm working, I wouldn't just, you know, work on the same. Yeah, it's working on the same thing, but like once a step is done, I copy it over and then like work more. So if I need to pull go back a little bit,
Mhm.
being able to like grab like either a detail that I uh, didn't end up using in the next step, but like decide I want to use it again.
Yeah.
That or just like being able to like
Iterative process with 3D definitely seems to be one of our positives
Yeah.
that we've gained from this, right?
Yeah.
The opportunity in prototype stage
Yeah.
or even in prototype design, right?
Yeah.
When we're even just looking at what kind of what degree of whole curve are we going to be looking for?
Yeah.
And being able to do that multiple times and really getting down to the nitty gritty. And another thing that you said there that's interesting to me is like working within the same system. Sometimes our pieces we have to do a resin cast of a thing and then green sculpt on top of that resin because of like that's how we did all the scaffolding, as I recall. To make those 360, we had to you had Eli, you had to originally sculpt it in monster clay, then you made a mold and made a casting of that, and then flipped it upside down, and then did
That's
green
right,
sculpt
yeah.
on the bottom. And then so to keep that in shape, to keep that consistent, and then just at the end of the day can be cumbersome. I think at the end of the day, also looking at the test shots, I'm excited for you to actually see them too, Eli, and like hold them. It's like the precision with which they've been being made in the end factory stage has been incredible. So like it's this like this is very close. It's so close to the original green stuff and resin that you made that it's been very heartening. Um,
Yeah, I mean they've made progress too. I mean just
Yeah.
as we've been increasingly particular and precise about what we do, the factory has also kind of upped their game to kind of
Yeah.
keep up with us, which is great. So a couple other, yeah, I mean definitely the iterative side of things is an interesting, just kind of carrying on your topic there, like what was a new and interesting process. The fact that you could kind of I mean, something that would initially be done in concept art, in past times, like what we could do this or this or this.
Yeah.
Now I could just be like digitally, well, here's 6 versions of a thing. Because at least in some cases you can cut and paste like, all right, we know we want the pipes here, but we don't know what we want the front light. So here's what the pipes look like with this front, that front, and that front. And obviously we're good at visualizing things, so we can all kind of do that in our heads, but sometimes it's nice to just be able to see it and even maybe print it up and compare the two and have Hamster paint it.
Yeah,
Like,
the
okay,
comparison
now
is a
that we
big
see
one.
it with the red pipes and the blue pipes, we know we want the blue pipes or whatever. Another
Comparison is
thing
a
that's
big one for
nice
sure.
is being able to refine, kind of keep tinkering and refining details on a very small level. Like when I went back through for the final iteration of all the core pieces, I made a bunch of tiny little tweaks, like moving things like a 32nd of an inch, because just having, when I finally had, first of all, prototypes in my hand that had been printed of like the 12th version or whatever, that wasn't quite the final one. I think Mark 15 was my official like final version of each thing. And some things actually were more than 15, some were less.
Yeah,
but
that was the
tried
one
to
I
keep
was
it.
like, yes.
Yeah. But anyhow, as I was generating those, there were a few things like the grooves in the edge of the floor you noted, Tyler, they didn't show up super well, so I made those like twice as big, which is only like a 64th of an inch, but that's different than 128th of an inch. And those kind of things were like certain things I just pulled out features a little bit, pushed them in a little bit, stuff that I knew would read better, would be easier to paint. And that's stuff that, I mean, to some extent, when you're sculpting in clay or green stuff, you can just see that because you have it right in front of you and you can hold it, turn it in the light. So you don't make, you make better choices on the initial scaling of things. However, sometimes you don't get it perfect and then you have to either scrape it off and redo it. Whereas if I can just grab a bit and rescale it digitally, that is easier.
I think that's also a really interesting point too, right? Where you know I love that. Like that definitely feels in the sense of like digital art versus traditional art, even like if someone's a painter versus someone's a painter digitally, I think that does still ring true in the same exact way. Is that the opportunity to delete or erase or undo in a digital perspective is fantastic, especially in an iterative process, especially in a sketching process. It can be very, very easy to be, okay, cool, I'm learning this line, I'm just deleting it every time I'm doing it. but I'm trying to understand what this curve is, how I'm making this actual brush work. And then when you're working in the physical, the thing that you said, right? Like, if it's off, I'm gonna immediately see it in this traditional art form, and I think that's an interesting. I don't know if I've ever been able to quantify it in my head better than what you just said, because it's like it's been a debate, because it's like I agree. I think of both traditional and digital as both high forms of art. I think incredible work comes out of both of them, and there is just a difference in working in which one. And it's not always a technical thing. It is more of a innate kind of instinctual. Oh, I just know what's wrong when it's a physical thing. Like I can just kind of tell.
Like if you
And
paint,
maybe
you
that's
know
also the
what size
comfortability with
details,
the medium.
when you're holding a thing, you're like, all right, I can maybe make some tiny little marks on the hilt of that dagger, but it won't even come out in the print, let alone
Right.
when someone tries it.
Yeah.
Whereas if I put them on there in green stuff, I'm either gonna, about the limits of what you can do with human hands and eyes are the limits of what you can paint anyways.
Yeah.
So there's not much point
When you
in going
have
finer.
the 3-inch dagger in front of you, you're like, oh, it's got to be a little bigger for that to show up. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Toby.
Yeah, and to that, well, I had one thing to say, and then I had a thing to say for what you're saying. Like, I feel like one thing that like it's easy to lose with 3D is that when we're talking about the scale, when you print it out and see it in real life, like having something too small just makes it feel like it's like, especially with like the minis and stuff like that. I'm not sure how to describe it because it feels like even if it's technically the right scale for the minis, it just feels like it's like smaller than.
Do you feel like it's unrealistic? Do you feel
Yeah,
like
I feel like
it ruins the illusion of the thing?
Yeah, like for example, like wood grain.
Uh-huh.
Like
Oh yeah,
if you did wood grain in the scale of actual wood grain, first off, you won't see it.
Yeah,
But
right.
also like basically there's like a decisions you need to make with what you want represented,
Yeah.
and that you know in 3D like 3D
In a
sculpted and
physical
printed stuff.
medium, you're
Yeah.
going to know how
Yeah.
much accentuation on
Yeah.
a design is good
Yeah.
or too much or too little.
Yeah.
And in the digital sense, it
Yeah.
sometimes has to wait till the print. Because
Yeah.
you're like, I've got it blown up to this, it looks fantastic, and then you're like, oh, I forgot that it's that big.
Like you can tell it's there, but it doesn't feel like you have
And
your
even if
mini
you have a
has
good enough
access
printer,
to it.
yeah, even if you have a good enough printer
Yeah.
to get that level of detail in there, it's like, well, that's neat, but like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what did this add?
Yeah.
What did this
It's
add
got to be
beyond
frustrating
like
to paint.
what? Yeah,
And-
that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
How
and
easy
just
is that
like
to paint?
Yeah.
well just I mean the wood grain's a wonderful example, but like just as in minis typically the faces, the facial features, just various physical characteristics are accentuated, so you see them on the table.
Yeah,
Everyone's got a bigger
exactly.
hand because you've got a bigger haft to your spear, so it doesn't bend every single
Right.
damn time
Yeah.
you sneeze on it.
I guess. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah. No, that's pretty much it. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you have to shift,
Yeah.
so you don't want to represent them exactly faithfully
Yeah.
to scale.
I guess it's also like not only just like we're talking about minis, like the features that you want to represent, like for example, like on train piece, like a door handle or something like that. Like you want to like make some of those features that your mini can interact with a little bit bigger, so like
Yeah.
it's
got to
like,
read.
Yeah.
It's yeah. There's
or highlights over just background detail.
Right. Right. That's one thing in like film, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll adjust something because they're like, yeah, it just didn't register, and you can't tell what this thing
Yeah.
is. So yeah, normally somebody wouldn't send you. I feel like the film noir thing where they cut up a bunch of newspaper and they send a ransom note. I feel like that's just an out. They're like, we can't have handwritten stuff. Nobody's going to be able to read it. So what if the guy's sending out a newspaper clippings, and so it's easier to read? They're big black letters, and so we can look at it. And I feel like that's the
makes
excuse
sense.
there. Moving on. That actually, I think that could actually piggyback to another question. which is how would you guys say we as try to stay communicative and try to stay aligned on similar pieces within the same family? Now, you've kind of already addressed some of that, Toby, when you were talking about how when you were working on the ramp and the catwalks, it was easier to kind of pull directly from what Eli had been doing, at least on the top, and adjust it to the piece. But I know for Starforged, we didn't have too much of we didn't have like handoffs as much as we did with like Lowtown, for instance. Lowtown, we had a couple of those pieces where we had to like start in one and then hand it off to the other person, or the sculptors had to kind of like be joined on the same design. But I'd love to open that up to you guys, because I also think it kind of speaks to the base design of Starforged in terms of like why we chose the greebling, why we chose the lived-in kind of look, why we did the aesthetics we chose, and then how you guys felt like you could keep aligned as we moved forward.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. This is one of the ones off Discord, right? Someone had kind of paired this with a question of how do you maintain consistency while also allowing for individual expression,
Yes.
Which is probably in some ways a bit less of a thing in sci-fi, in that, it's less the work of artisans and more the work of a, military industrial complex, or whoever it is in the grim dark of the far future.
Or a military
but
communist
still,
complex, who knows?
But so I'd say there's several layers to that. The first is that for most sets, at least, the sci-fi is an exception. We have kind of a bank of established ways of doing things. There's certain ways we have done, say, stone or wood or slate or whatever in the past that we want to kind of maintain. So we'll refer back to those. We have made some changes in that over time. Like, I feel like our caverns designs evolved a lot from the original caverns to the caverns deep. This became a lot more sophisticated in terms of delving into how limestone works, and flowstone and so on. But anyways, so there's that. Often, always at the start, we'll kind of, as a group, decide on what are the important, kind of the main features of a set and what we want to emphasize. We want it to feel dangerous. Do we want to emphasize height? Do we want to, what kinds of interesting details do we want to sort of foreground?
Some of that comes out in the geometry as well, right?
And then that, very much the geometry. So, for example, the hull curve, that was kind of a group decision. We looked at a bunch of things, we played around with stuff, and we're like, this really helps things feel claustrophobic. It's what you see again and again in designs of corridors, both in, even like real spacecraft, which tend to be kind of cramped for space, or, pick a franchise, you're going to find it in there somewhere. So we'll have kind of a mood board, if you will, sort of a virtual thing. And then often what we'll do is kind of establish, like for Wildlands is a good example. I kind of created a palette of plants. So I sculpted up like a whole thing that wasn't even a piece. It just had a bunch of examples of plants that we then cast and shared around for everyone to kind of refer to as kind of like a base of like, here's some things that are all over. And then, we can add additional, unique plants or details, but that way we have some consistency. And usually there's sort of a handoff as well, where someone will kind of take the lead on the thing. I tended to pretty much go over, like, I think everything in swamps and forests and wildlands. I think Toby, like you sort of took the lead on the roofs in Lowtown, for example. We initially kind of got together over how the slate would look. And then, kind of you handled roofs, and you did some details on like the elevation stuff, whereas I was kind of, maintaining like I did most of the wood stuff so that would, have its kind of consistent look. Or, it might be something Michelle will take, something that's got like her trademark intricate details. For reliquaries, we kind of each had our spheres. We did do some things that multiple people worked on, but like Michelle did the elven stuff.
There was handoffs of like some people were working in tandem on one whole theme, but people were basically still kind of working on their own throne or hero piece when they were working.
And then you just in those cases we could just kind of compare stuff back and forth. Like Toby and I both did artificer stuff. And would try to kind of Echo designs. So it really depends a bit on like how, how much consistency there needs to be. Like
Yeah.
for something like Starforged, all the core pieces really wanted to look like they were, part of the same manufacturer. You didn't want anything that stood out as being too odd. So that you have to be particular about. If it's something like, what are the gargoyles on a cathedral or something? Well, they might have been made by 15 different artisans. They don't necessarily need to all be in exactly the same
Yeah,
style,
yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, often there is at least one kind of consistency pass that usually I will do going over things, but someone will kind of be taking the lead to maintain a consistency on a thing, and then
Yeah.
beyond that, particularly for like the fun showpieces, that's
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah.
our
Well,
individual
that's
stuff
all
gets to,
character, right? Like that
Toby
gets to
makes this
be.
cool plasma cannon, or you know, um, Nina made the lizard man throne, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went on for a bit there, Toby. Sorry if you have stuff to
No, you
add.
covered a lot of like,
Well, I was gonna even ask, potentially a further question for you,
yeah,
was, because, I think more of your work in Starforged was more in the accessory range
yeah,
because of that, and with the dome and some of those other pieces. Was there anything in there where you were like, well, you've already kind of talked about how the STLs helped inform that, but was there something else where you're like, this was a challenge to do, but I ended up being able to take from lessons that we had been learning through the core and these other things to make this design, like potentially like the energy unit or something like that. Was there anything like that?
hmm. I mean, like, how to like have it tied together, or just,
Yeah, still
yeah,
like how it tied together and how it was
yeah,
communicative to like Eli's core design, or how we were all kind of talking about what we wanted
yeah,
from the scope of everything.
yeah. So I guess I would say that, like when I was talking about earlier, like when we were like, when I was using parts of like the getting the section of the tube, oh sorry, the
The ramp.
pipes, yeah,
Oh, the
pipe,
yeah.
well, yeah, or like pulling some details off there, like using that, it's like it's a kind of a simple way to get some of the language at similar and just tie it together. Like for example, on the dome roof, I imitated some of the language that Eli you did on the bottom of the corner wall piece,
Right.
and like that, or like with
The
the
windshield even, right? Like the
you
windshield.
know
Did you base any of that on sorry. Did you base any of the actual like octagon design on something similar that Eli had been doing with the cockpit
I
windshield
mean,
at all? Or
yeah,
was
I
that
think
just
that
like
actually kind of came out of something Toby had been doing earlier that we all agreed we liked, that ended up not
that's
becoming
right.
part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we're
yeah,
like, yeah, this is a good direction. So we kind of both echoed that in the cockpit and in the dome.
That's right.
Does
yeah,
that
and then
sound right,
also
Toby?
we already had some language of hexagons going on,
Mhm.
so I
Like at
put
the
that,
top and
yeah,
yeah.
stuff like that, and also like even like the pipe uh section, like since that's a connection point,
Mhm.
I use that a lot on the piece, like for example, the bottom of the gun, because that's supposed to be able to go on that. But
Yeah,
that
yeah,
also like
yeah.
dictates, like where like wires would be coming out of and stuff like that, and like
Right.
so, yeah. And then
Not only the conceptual, like how does this piece actually translate to all the other pieces around it,
yeah,
but by taking some of the actual, I guess
yeah,
that there was kind of like
and
another
yeah. Oh,
part
sorry.
to
Yeah,
that may also breed something else, which was sort of your main focus when you're deciding what is essential, right, with your sculpts, and some of that had to deal with scale. Now this is from Finley, where it was like, what do you think of when when we're looking at scale on a new set or a new biome or something? How do we think about that, and how does the scale impact our choices, and what then becomes the main focus when we're deciding what is essential to keep and what is essential to kind of like uh, uh, carry over from past like backwards compatibility stuff.
yeah.
That's a good one. Do you want to go first, Toby, or shall I?
You can go first because I just was talking.
Yeah. So Scale is that's just a really interesting question, asking whether we think about it sort of on the piece scale or on the like piece within a big
Yeah.
build scale. And I would say we start with the piece scale because it's very important that everything kind of stand on its own, that it look good in isolation, because many pieces will be in isolation, or at least will be in small builds. You might have I don't know, in the case of sci-fi thing, you might have a very small bunker, or one or two walls next to some forest terrain if it's some kind of a weird ruin or something. And you always want the individual piece to stand on its own. But then after you've got kind of a roughed out idea of what you think you're going to like, um, then, well, for example, I would start making digital kind of big builds. I would put a bunch of stuff together, and would all look at me like, do we like how that pattern looks when there's 40 of them? Or is it kind of annoying, or is it kind of confusing, or is it too busy, or whatever? And likewise, we'll print some prototypes up, we paint them so we can see how it looks with paint. Because you do want your final builds to also look good, because if you're building a big, a warehouse or a space station or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
you don't want it to look, weird for some reason. You don't want it to look off. So we start with it on the small scale, I would say primarily, but with thinking in the back of our heads, where's it going to go? And then as we've roughed that out, we go big, and then sometimes we return and start tinkering. That's something that happened a lot in cities,
Yeah.
Untold, certainly.
Yeah, and City is
as well as
also
here. Mhm.
a weird monster, a weird beast in design because of the split from low town, high town, what that meant for the rest of the project, how
Mhm.
long we had already been working on that, and how we had been trying to match everything there anyway, and then breaking it away. Okay, how do we still get the same you know momentum in this project without some of these other pieces that we were utilizing to do these things? Do we have to make new
Yeah.
ones? And some when you change a project in the middle like that, it can really upend some of the design in a way that you have to like go back to square on like everything that hasn't been sculpted yet. Like you just like
Yeah.
divorce it
And
apart.
also, I mean, another thing that was tricky about that one was the biscuit system evolved as part of that. And there was a while where we were kind of on tenterhooks, not knowing if it was going to be feasible, like if the
Yeah.
factory could do it, and at a cost that we would be happy with. And, we tested it digitally, and we're like, yeah, we think this is great. And so we had to go ahead and like spring for an actual final piece to be produced, which is not something we've done in the past. And make sure, all right, if we have an actual thing, we put the actual biscuits in it. Does it work? Does it look good? And
Yeah.
so that, and obviously those, the biscuits, particularly for medieval stuff, not so much for science fiction, where you can fit random slots into mechanical
Yeah, the
contrivances
design is
relatively easily.
right.
Yeah.
But that definitely affected some of our architectural details. We're like, okay, how can we make this look like it's natural for so that the kind of the triple beams on the sides of the floors, that was something I found in some like old Scandinavian architecture, was something that you did see occasionally with some stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I'm just okay, so this is the style of these people, whoever they are in this medieval world. It's a plausible one because it really was in medieval architecture, and then we could kind of fit it in and go
How to
from there.
hide some of the functionality necessities,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah. Yeah,
that's always a big essential trick that I know that you guys are always focused on is, hey, how do I we want to have a biscuit hole here, or we want to have a pull accessory hole. Okay, is there a way I can sculpt around it to create a better blank slate? Like we don't want to try to make something pear skinned and just sit there and quote unquote look ugly. But
yeah.
like all the work on any one of the trunks, within Wildlands, what you've done on the top of the dynamo turbine, even
Mhm.
that just concentric circles and things. They're just
Yeah.
it's a very subtle thing that is on the top of that for that pole accessory hole, but it's enough that it still to your point, it still looks fine on its own. It still
Yeah,
gets to have this character. It gets to have this thing.
I would say one of the kind of dominant characteristics of my approach to sculpting, honestly, is to want to find the logic in every piece and to make it, adhere to that. So that's kind of twofold. On the one hand, there's certain rules that different substances obey, whether it's limestone or lava or whatever, that
Yeah.
things will do. And so that's one half of the puzzle. And then the other is there's the thing we want the piece to do. We want
Yeah.
it to, one thing to fit into another thing. We want a shape that is 2 inches high by 3 inches by whatever and has a blob here so we can connect a bridge to it. And if there are any actors in the audience, it's a bit like having to, find the justification or the motivation for your character. Like sometimes your character is doing something kind of outrageous and you need to find a way that rings true. That why is your character doing this? Why the hell is this lump of limestone shaped this way? Well, I better find a way that the faults could have split through the rock. So this bit's hanging out and okay, maybe the bottom flaked off. And so it's natural to have an overhang, whatever the case might be.
It's
That
not
was
right
very
or
much
wrong.
my approach.
It's why did this happen?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a
And
why.
I mean,
It's
well, there
just-
is sort of a right, it follows a logic. And that was something actually that I was very adamant about with all the greebling in the science fiction set. Because you will definitely see, particularly steampunk is especially guilty of this, I think.
Right.
Often you'll see just stuff tacked on because it looks good. Why are there gears here? Because they look good.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
like
Steam moves
some of
through
that,
it, and it does it. It does. It's a punk. Yeah.
yeah, and that can be fun, whatever. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted these pieces to make sense, not so the things that are on them, I wanted to be able to justify what each little bit of, if anyone doesn't know, greebling is just kind of industry term for surface details. And like in Star Wars, it's all that stuff on the surface of the Death Star or whatever. That's greebling.
Yeah.
What is it? Maybe George Lucas knew what all those pieces were, but mostly he's like, it takes some models apart, stick it on there, it
Stick
looks
it on
cool.
there. Just make it a thing.
So fine, but
Yeah.
if you stop and look at a corridor and a spaceship, you want to be able to say, partly because this is great for RPGs. Okay, this is a hatch that gives you access to the oxygen system, and this is the button that triggers the alarm klaxons, and this is the controls for the
Yeah.
sprinkler system. If there's
Yeah.
an emergency, fire breaks out, whatever. And so if your character is walking down that corridor, the game master can be like, well, that little thing's blinking there. You look at it, oh shit, it's the oxygen sensor.
Yeah.
But it just
Finley's also saying
subconsciously.
it helps give dimension, right? It helps also
Yeah,
give it makes it not just a flat surface. It helps give this like character.
Yes,
and
visually it gives it way more character, but also I think subconsciously, if it all does make sense the way you put it there, anyone that looks at it is going to kind of inherently feel there's a certain sense of rightness there, because they're not like, why is there in fact a hatch 9 feet up where you can't reach it or whatever, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we tried to do that. We tried to make nothing you couldn't justify as a detail.
Right.
So
I would ask you, Toby, the sort of like the end of that question. Is there something that you focus on when you're deciding what's essential on the piece? Is there something that
Yeah.
you like? Like, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to
Please
continue on to that as well, because like having the piece like mechanically function in my mind is important, like when designing something, well, especially in sci-fi. And like as a kid, I always like sketching mechanical stuff and like all those like machines and like
Gundams.
that, but also like there's like Goldberg thing where you can see how things function.
Yeah.
So like I want like when, for example, when designing the barricade, well, I can't say on this, but when doing the barricade, I like the idea of that. I sculpted it as if it was like a collapsible mechanism where like you can see on the sides where it's like it's a tiered, almost like it can collapse, and like the panels in the middle, or it looks like you can fold onto each other. And then on the back, designed so it's like there's like a accordion type thing, so it looks like it can like collapse horizontally, and then like you can see like the gear tracks. So like it was really fun to me, but also like important when designing to have like how something mechanically functions in such a mechanical setting, like
Like
sci-fi,
yeah.
sci-fi and stuff. Also did a little bit with the the rocket cone, where like it's you can use it as like a base for things, but also like as a rock on the back of a ship, like the thruster of it. But like we needed to give a little bit more footprint of it so it doesn't topple over. So I thought it would be interesting to design it as like these stabilizer legs that can like it looks like it can fold out and in and adjust based on the angle it's needed.
And it would be a fantastic dream to do actual like folding folding
like
little like the flanges at the bottom.
Yeah. When I designed when I designed the barricade piece, I also designed like did a quick thing where I just took the old elements of the model and just like did the collapse version of it just to show like
it was
hey,
very
this
cute. It was this little tiny it's a great idea too. It's
it might go in one of the what's called the
just like a future
the writing update things.
The writing yes.
Because I was going to do some writing stuff. I have been busy.
Dev stories.
Dev stories. That's what it was. Yeah, so I might include that on there.
Well, yeah, and then we can show the photo. We can show the little like
exactly
how you shrunk it.
Yeah.
Well, there's a question by Ezed that I think is also kind of in the same vein. When you're starting in a new biome, how much are you working on all the pieces in parallel versus finishing to 80%, let's say, one piece and then moving on to another? And I think that's an interesting question because it's not always. I don't think it's always a direct answer, and especially we're attempting to do things. Every project we're kind of looking at. Does this project require something different from us? / is there something that we can improve upon with what we've already done in the past? And so I think that's one thing in my head that comes up specifically about like, do you do one and then the whole set, or do you do everything all at once? And I guess I'd love to direct that at either of you as well. Still, like I know my answer. I just is there a way that you guys try to conceptualize when you're designing something? Are you like, I need to get this one piece right, then I'll go to everything else, or is it I'd love to get everything into 80 and then actually, or I'd love to get everything at like 20% and then move on individually from there. If you want to start seeing that, you can.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'd say generally we do try to get everything to at least say 25% where we know the basic geometry, because there's nothing more frustrating than getting a piece beautifully sculpted and being like, well, that's nice, but it doesn't actually fit with anything now that we've figured out what the whole set's doing.
Yeah.
Which has happened from time to time. So yeah, nowadays we definitely try to kind of get the basic system figured out for each set, and that may be, there are usually almost always multiple systems within a set. So for example, in Starforged, we have the core pieces, and then we have kind of the pipe catwalk system. They interact with each other, but each one kind of stands alone as a set.
Yeah.
So we kind of worked out the core geometry, and then we worked out the pipe geometry, and then the third thing was the accessory stuff, fitting in pole accessories. We went back, added some pole accessory holes, whatever.
I'd say the accessories or showcase pieces are usually the ones that will go to because they're a bit more individual. They're not always so tied to a family of accessories.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to do that a little bit more often as we've moved forward, but I think a lot of that actually comes out in the paint when we're doing. It seems like it's less of a sculptural thing. And for instance, like when Hamster was going through the paints on Starforged and figuring out which ones he was kind of deeming as interior accessories and which ones he was determining were more of an exterior accessory. And so then those colors started to blend into a family, regardless of if those pieces specifically have been made for each other necessarily. It's always kind of a hand-in-hand thing. Like if the energy unit wasn't really meant to work with the turret base, they probably wouldn't have ended up in the similar paint scheme. But I do think that it seems to come out more in the paint on accessories or show pieces than it does in necessarily in the sculpt.
And to that, I thought of something that it's a little bit different from what we're talking about now, but I found it interesting that sculpting this time around was different than before. Is like those since it was digital as well, it was a little bit easier to do as well. But there was more feedback from Hamster about like oh this is good and all, but either like the factory needs to do less paint screen, or we would like to have it pop more. So can you like go back and adjust the sculpt? But like we never really went back to sculpts before to
Right.
adjust for the painting, and
Right.
yeah,
And that is one thing that in the future, I guess is what I also would say for Dwarf and Porch in general is Eli said this, I've said this on multiple streams, and we've tried to make it written as much as possible. Sculpting is still our thing. Like we are still going to be sculpting a lot of stuff. It's just the nature of the factory has to have a digitized item at the end of the day. And so we do have to scan them if they're a sculpt, or if they're a 3D item already, that's fine. We basically just transfer it over. But on the whole, we probably may I don't even say I don't want to say necessarily just probably, but just to open and nuance of future planning is hard sometimes. That like utilizing 3D as a base for prototypes and a base to work out maybe even beyond some geometry, even just some rough designs, and being able to print them out and see how we like them next to each other. Hey, we do like the level that if we put these branching vines right here and they kind of did all these like interconnecting patterns, we could do this really cool thing. Okay, let's go ahead and sculpt that and move on. That's going to be sculpted in clay or green stuff or whatever it's going to be. But we did some preliminary stuff in 3D just to make certain that we kind of like how those things were lining up. That might be our future, right? Like that has a real reason because it's a good tool.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be
has
a
more
hybrid.
to do with it for me. Like I would rather have something that really makes the process better for each sculptor, but also what makes the process better on the whole for the concept and the design, and if it's worth it. If it's necessary for the design to try to do it in 3D first, just to like make certain that we like how everything works, we're gonna do that. But more times than not, Eli, Tobi, Michelle, you guys are always so diligent and good at your work and within your own design. And I mean, Eli, you and Michelle always draw everything anyway, and like there's a lot of measuring, there's a lot of triple checking everything before you guys start sculpting anything anyway. So I think we do a lot of due diligence already, but like it's just getting to be another extra tool in the toolbox is what I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll depend on, to a large extent, the kind of the complexity of the geometry and how sort of technological or mechanical it is. Like, for example, if I'm going to do a tree, there's almost no chance I'm going to need to mess around with it digitally. On the other hand, the water wheel, I did a lot of digital exploration of that, culminating in the armature that I made for it, which was sort of the full internal structure that got the sizing exactly precise, because it was very particular to be able to do various things we need to do, fit a mini inside it, still fit it within 2 inches, whatever. It's quite tricky. And then I took that 3D printed armature and I covered it with green stuff and did the final hand-hewn wood look on it because I felt that would be better done by hand.
And it showed in the piece, right? Like, and that was the other thing we talked about, right? Where it's like wood grain is probably going to be a little tough to do right in digital. We've yet to see it from us, even we haven't tried it, but it's probably going to be the one that I'm like, I'm comfortable keeping that in sculpt. That's fine.
Yeah.
With me. we've got a great scanner, and it picked up all of the textures that were in the Lowtown offering. So like, we definitely have proven to ourselves that we have a way to keep the sculpt alive. We are going to do the giveaway right now, and then we'll basically just kind of keep asking questions. We'll keep going through the rest of our questions. The keyword today is going to be sculpt, SCULPT. No case sensitive, but go ahead and put sculpt in the chat now. It is a $50 gift card. Now this is a $50 gift card that is good for our web store as well as our current campaign once it reaches the pledge manager. Now, if that changes, we will let you know, but currently we have no way of adding a gift card to anybody's first part of their pledge. But that's also the benefit of stretch pay and things. But you can then utilize it within the pledge manager if you wanted to add something to your cart, right? Like you can use that gift card to help you pay for that. So we're gonna give that just a little bit of time, and then we will go ahead and roll for the giveaway. But before I lose the question, we'll just get it asked now. Let's see, where was it? Do you have a piece count in mind that you adhere to, or do you sculpt until the set feels complete? I really, again, yet another thing that we're trying to adjust, trying to become better practicers of, is knowing what we want to do entering a project and kind of trying to give ourselves a rough number, especially after Lowtown. It was another example of, well, we're realizing, or we're getting to the point where it's harder for us to do these 180 piece Kickstarters. So we have to kind of adjust our behavior in the way that we interact with our product. So this project itself is with all stretch goals included, like I think a total of like 43 pieces. So much different kind of offering, but also much different undertaking from the dev team. But that, I think we started out with knowing for a fact that we were going to need at least like the 11 core pieces, and then we had already concepted the catwalks by the time we were really talking about piece count, that we knew, hey, we were going to need at least X number of catwalk pieces. I think at that point it was like 8. We knew we needed like this 8 number. And then beyond that, we were like, well, we're going to need at least, 5 to 8 accessories on top of that. Definitely just say 8 for right now, because let's give ourselves the extra room. And then from beyond that, I guess we'll have to figure it out. As we move forward, I would much rather know the sort of, not only the piece count, but to start at a piece count and whittle that down to the things that make the set feel complete, right? Like, hey, if we want to do 40 pieces, let's keep concepting, let's keep doing things to the point where we're saying, no, this really feels like it's done. This feels like this encapsulated everything that this new biome or even just this new iteration of a biome deserved. So that'd be my long and short of it, of like, it's a mixture of both, and it can ebb and flow depending on how the design continues. But mostly what we aim for is knowing a piece count, kind of like going into a thing. And that just kind of evolves over time. That's the can you go over the capsule beds? I feel like the picture's not doing them justice. And was there ever talk of making a second piece cover for them? We'll see about that. I have to make a notation about the capsule bed. The quick answer on that one is there is no talk of a second piece to cover it or anything, because it's 360
second layer, second bid.
right. Yeah. It's because it stacks on top of itself.
Yeah, I guess you can do that.
Right. Yeah. You
thing,
could, like, or even in the similar direction or whatever. But the intention is that it is an open face thing that stacks on top of itself, used vertically, even upside down. You can then use it as additional storage container if you place it with the.
You can even do like something like this. I don't know.
What are you showing?
Helpful. Just putting something over the bed.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That was. Yeah.
And to give an update, I've sculpted a bottom texture to this now. It's like we don't have it printed out yet, but it's going to look like it's kind of like a storage crate or something like that. Right. So you can use that as a crate.
It looks like it has a mechanism, hatch latch thing. Let's go ahead and roll the giveaway before too much more time goes by, just so I don't forget. Rolling. Oh my gosh, it was Merc. Merc, you've won the giveaway. I don't know how often we say this,
Congratulations.
but that's awesome. Okay, so we will get that to you by a time. I can't remember exactly what Chris was saying about how we're actually trying to collect the information and get it out to people. But we are going to be able to do that. Love to purchase those STLs one day. Make it so. Yeah, our future in terms of STLs are, I'm going to tell you right this moment, non-existent. We're certainly not talking about it. We're certainly not in the mindset that we want to go down that route just yet. But it's not saying no forever. It's just that currently that's just not what we want. Yep. They are open like that as they slot into each other to stack. Yes. There's all of the. How do you keep clay masters intact through the prototype molding process? I keep losing my small details. Yeah, that's that. Yep. Yeah. There was a few times where we ended up having to make our own molds on sculpts that we had already done, which proved problematic. Would either destroy the sculpt or we would lose some details or whatever. And then if the silicone mold hadn't ruined the clay and dried it out or whatever, maybe there was a chance to save it. But when our factory gets in the olden days, the factory would get the sculpts, then they would make us polystone copies of them. I do not know the state of what they would be like after the polystone because
We've seen some of them. They got destroyed.
well,
Yeah.
I know they get destroyed from expanded master process to
Yeah.
the steel mold. So that's what I don't know.
No, yeah.
Do they make the expanded master
No,
right there, and then that's
yeah.
how they made the polystone stuff?
For the polystone, I think we've gotten back sculpts from them, and it was pretty intact.
Oh, sure, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Like, I'm certain.
Yeah.
I just mean I
Yeah.
currently don't have the information on that.
As
But if anybody has any tips on keeping your clay masters safe or more intact through the molding process, if
one
either
thing,
of
yeah,
you-
I can say I'm sure Eli has a lot more experience with it, but like if you're doing small details, like you can't just like put it on lightly. You need to like go in and like really push the small detail on and then make sure that like the seam of it behind where the small detail is and the thing you're based on is like very like sealed off, so like the silicone doesn't get behind it, and like when you pull it, and it will just pull it out. Like so, when you pull out the sculpt, like sometimes on the small details, the clay of that small detail will still be in the mold.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you need to go back and just like make sure like
either too small or too not loose, but I just mean like it seems like it's like you're saying it's just getting sucked on too tight to the silicone. It's just getting too
Well, if there's any gap between the detail and the main piece, the silicone will get it in it, and when you're pulling out the piece, it will fall off. So you just go back and just like make sure to like tediously just make sure like all parts of that are smooth and it feels like it's. If you can move it easily with your finger, then it might probably will. Yeah.
Got no
Yeah,
hope.
like make sure like
stable
push it like when you push it down, you want to get your like fingerprints on it. And this is of course talking about monster clay.
Right.
But
Yeah, green stuff is a lot more durable
And-
for that sort of thing.
yeah, so
because it's more of an epoxy, right? Like green stuff is more.
It is
of
an epoxy, yeah.
Yeah. and just
Um,
basically go back after you push it on and like smooth it out, take your fingerprints off, and re-detail it while it's on there as well.
Got it.
Yeah, it's often actually better to pull up some of the base mass of clay into the detail. Like say you want to make a snake. It's easier to get a nice snake shape, say by rolling a little tube of, or a little tiny little cylinder of clay and sticking it on there.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's better, and in the long run, maybe less time consuming, to just take your ground layer and pull it up into the shape of a snake and then refine that shape so that it's part of the base. Of course, that assumes you don't already have, the grass around the snake skeleton, because then you're gonna have to go back and fix that.
Right,
But
right.
in any case, yeah, there's inevitably a mix of the two techniques, but usually what I try to do for the sort of things that I know are going to get like a snake. Like I actually think there was a panel full of snakes. Was that in Dungeon of Doom?
Yeah, the
Uh,
snake
right?
floor.
Yeah,
Snake
I think
pit,
I
snake
had to
pit.
redo that because that got molded and some of the snakes got pulled off, and I had to do another 10 snakes or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, because if you're doing 15 snakes trying to pull them all up simultaneously, and you have to stick them on there, and then trouble happens.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got time still. I was thinking we were we were gonna end by like 7:30 if you guys are good. But
There are a few more questions I pulled off of the Discord.
that's
Yeah.
what I was gonna say. We do still have a couple
Yeah.
more. Was there anything interesting that you wanted to add? Because most of mine are going to be about your guys' personal preferences. So if there's
Mhm.
anything else that like still Starforged related, if you had from your list, Eli, that you thought would be fun to talk about, we can go ahead and go one of those.
Well, let's see. As far as Starforge specifically, um, I mean, there's an interesting one here. I apologize. I didn't know who asked all of these because I was trying to keep the list manageable. It feels like sci-fi naturally lends itself to stacking builds to create elevation. How do you count for this as you design? For instance, the basic walls have an inward cut, much like wildland escarpments, thus giving each elevation a notch effect when you stack. What is your thinking about how those things would go vertically? How much that affect design decisions? Okay, so there is sort of a tension between a hull curve and stacking things up, because you get, if you stack them in layers, you get sort of grooves, essentially going around, which is not necessarily a terrible thing. It could be a design element of bunkers, spaceships, and that was kind of how I thought of it, actually, because we felt the hull curve was very important to, creating that sort of atmospheric, slightly claustrophobic interior. But also and this also goes back to kind of the logic of the pieces. They're modular, right? The Dwarven Hordes pieces are modular, but I was also kind of thinking of these as like actually modular in the world in which they exist, as many space stations are. For example, they're brought up in pieces and assembled in orbit. So some of the greebling on the pieces is literally attachment points where you might connect wall unit A to wall unit B and so on.
Yeah.
You'll see some small holes and so on in there.
Yeah.
And the idea being that, if your drop ship comes down and you need to throw up some bunkers, you bring them out in pieces and you assemble them, and before the Tyranids arrive or whatever. And so the basic unit has a certain shape, and if you stack them, well, you can see where the two, there's unit A above unit B. That's how it looks, because that's how it's made. That's how it's literally made in that world. And so I felt like that, at least to my sense, kind of solved the logic of, all right, why are they these, sort of layers that you can see? I mean, just as you can see layers in many, actual examples of architecture, you can see multiple floors. There's beams between the levels, and I think it also makes sense in this case. I mean, obviously the biscuit system means you can make great multi-layer things. And I think if I'm building, when I finally get my stuff and I build a giant battle cruiser, I will probably have kind of offset layers so that kind of the central decks stick out further. So you wouldn't so much see that anyways, I think. But it's still conceptually, I think this will be a huge thing that was assembled in orbit because it was too big to launch from, within the gravity well. I don't know if that completely. Yeah, so I feel like that was an interesting tension
Yeah.
and that was my solution for it. I mean, thinking of the things as actual modular pieces.
Yeah.
I can imagine a future expansion that might have some angled pieces that would kind of take the hull curve either, in or out. It'd probably be reversible, so they would do both. That, if you wanted it more kind of like a pyramidal
Right.
kind of top to your ship, or you wanted to make some kind of space ziggurat or something, that would be fun to do as a possible expansion. So that was one. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Toby. I see you've got something interesting under construction there.
No, I was just since we're talking about the layering it up, I just made a little just using the corner pieces upside down as like a
Hmm.
like the elevation type of like stack building style. And I'm working on a big build now using a multi-level uh a giant multi-level like boss fight room. So
Yeah.
a picture of that will go up soon. But yeah, it's like
Yeah, it should go up probably Saturday.
yeah.
Oh,
We've got some sewer compatibility that's going to be coming
Yeah.
out tomorrow. That's going to be kind of exciting.
one other thing I wanted to mention as far as the design for this specifically goes that I haven't seen too much of yet in the builds you guys have been doing at the studio, but that I was imagining some interesting like big, again, maybe like a big hangar bay or cargo bay and a big battle cruiser or something where you would kind of have alternating upside down and right side up, if you will, pieces, kind of creating a stepped layer. So you've got a lower deck and then a wider, like an upper
I'm
mezzanine that
actually
kind of
doing
builds
yeah.
up. You're doing that, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the
I'm
build.
sure I
Yeah.
knew you'd get to it sooner
Yeah.
or later.
Yeah.
But they were designed to work that way, so you can
Yeah.
biscuit, an upside down floor into a right side up floor, and you've got kind of the two designs work together.
What
So
I'm
that
also
was
excited
definitely part of
for,
it. One of the things as I was flipping things around digitally, I'm like, yeah, I want this
yeah,
to work, but I want not only upside down and right side up to work, but I want upside down to work with right side up
yeah.
if you stick them together.
Yeah.
So that is a thing.
What I'm excited for too is we got those 2x2 texture patches,
Mhm.
which are in multiples can in a line in a row or whatever. If you're reversing your pieces within an interior build like that, and
Mhm.
you've got that empty negative space if you're not putting it directly on a floor, you
Mhm.
can then slide the two. If you don't have another terrain tray under it or whatever, you could still slide a 2x2 texture patch underneath, and now it gives it this sort of like, hey, this is still a space underneath this, and we're going up a level. We're doing all
Right.
all the things you're talking about, and that was kind of when we actually got those artworks kind of like more finalized. It was yet another one of those moments where you're like, where was this like 2 months ago? Yeah, this would have been like perfect for some of the things that we were talking about and showing off.
Yeah.
So that also kind of comes into play when we talk about like what we're doing when we concoct a set and like how
Yeah.
things are supposed to morph together. It's like, okay, are we doing any printed materials too? Is that where we can get some of the things we get these bursts of color that we want to have color in? And that's been a kind of an interesting conundrum within sci-fi.
Yeah.
Can I get a
Another.
piece list
Okay.
for the
Oh, yeah.
Sandcrawler build? I can't imagine using it in a game, but it looks so cool. I could probably whip one up from the picture.
Oh, the one that
the
Yeah.
one that got posted in that I don't remember what it was
Oh
exactly,
yeah.
which update or what it was, but like
Yeah, I remember doing. I forgot which build it was
it
for,
was a
but
lot. That was like this giant. It looked like the
yeah, I put the diagonal wall upside down, and it's like, hey, that kind of looks like Sandcrawl. I need to
Yeah.
make that.
when you put and then you put it on the pipes.
Oh yeah, because I was Nate said, "Oh, making like showcase terrain traits." That's what it was for. So it was like,
Oh,
oh,
right,
and then
right,
he's
right,
like, a
right,
moisture
right,
farm. It's like, if I want to do a moisture farm, I got to do the job Sandcrawler.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sounded like you were about to say another one, Eli, if you wanted
Oh
to.
yeah. This was a double question from Discord. I'll answer number two first. How many other pieces exist to the point that they have a digital file unfinished, but that either got cut or pushed out to sequel? Scads. It would be impossible to give an accurate number because it depends how you count them.
Yep.
Like I said, there are many iterations of different things, some of which could be expanded into something else. There could be
Yeah.
a straight wall, B, C, D, Z. Um, and then, I mean, there are lots of things that are, kind of vague concepts and slightly more complete concepts and nearly complete. So, yeah, there's lots of stuff. I mean, we're creative folks and we got lots of ideas. If we do well here, we would love to do more sets and there's other stuff, but there's no way to put a number on it. The first part is what piece surprised you by having the most unexpected or unanticipated utility? I'll throw that one to Toby for starters, since he's had more chance to actually build with stuff, which is fun.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, let me just wrap my head around things. Because like there's so many pieces that like I keep saying this, but every day like I'm finding new ways to use the pieces. and I'm just trying to see which piece I keep using the most. Well, yeah, tubes. I'm sorry. The pipes were all.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I think I just lost Toby's
Yeah,
sound.
Toby, your mic may have turned off. Okay. Why don't you come over here real quick? Yeah, you can just come over here to this one, and I'll see if we can't really adjust the other one because the other one's not working. So, yep.
So yeah,
You were saying pipes, and
I
then
don't know which part I cut out on, but yeah. If you heard
You keep using the pipe terminus.
pipe terminus is like, well, we have so little of that piece, so it's like it's hard to
Yeah.
But like that or I like have to like think of, when you ask a question,
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of things. So that
the pylon struck me as
pylon's
very
like,
versatile.
yeah, I use
The stacking the pylons, when I think you may have done it the first time digitally, Eli, that we saw it.
Mhm.
But then when we got to see it in person, it made even more sense. Putting the pylons next to each other by just flipping them every other, right? Just
Yeah.
flipping every other, and now it's just this constant angle design from those like I-beams in the center was really neat. Like that's a trick I've used a couple of times in that artificer build for the dungeon. I used that in that. And what was interesting about that was that there is actually just enough space to put a 1x1 tile, because you also needed to be able to put the 1x2 in between it. But in a
Yep.
dungeon scenario, it was like, oh great, I can put these. I can just put the 1x1s right there, and they actually fit in between these two things, and it's giving this like extra little
Yeah.
motif.
Yeah,
to
so they can be
everything. It's really neat.
columns,
other
they can
piece,
be
like
landing craft,
Yeah,
or
yes,
landing
yeah.
gear.
like the
What?
barricade piece. I've used that.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
that's like a little roof that's like I wanted to have some like
Mm-hmm.
just not something that has a easy like cut like a
Mhm.
drop off or just like as a platform
Yeah.
or using it as like
Well, Miles, when Miles flipped it and used it as elevation,
yeah
that was another one that was like, oh yeah, I guess you could like it. And getting other pieces to match that elevation is sometimes tricky, but not by much. Like it's all in the same, increments, in the half-inch increments. So it's like, okay, cool, you just gotta have one of your other floor pieces, or you gotta have one of these other things, and then it helps match perfectly. So it was like it never stayed. Every single time you think of a new way to use a piece, and it may create like a, wait, how do I make this back to square, or how do I make this thing go back to this thing, it doesn't stay a problem for very long, I guess is what I would say. Like the usefulness that I have found is not necessarily piece based, it's more system based, where I've never stayed stuck on a thing. There's times where I've stayed stuck on like caverns. There's definitely times where I've stayed stuck in castles, as well as in some cities thing until we made Lowtown. But this one, I don't ever feel like I've ever had a problem building. It was usually just like okay, do I have to reconceptualize how long I want this room, or how much I want to step it up, because I just don't have the pieces to do so. And I think that would be my answer. Is like it's definitely more of a system based uh, thing, where like every piece gets to have so many different uses that like we are constantly figuring them out, but it also is the fun of it, I guess, at the end of the day. Yeah, that's a good one. So as we wrap up the stream tonight, I was wondering, before you walk back over there, because I'm gonna ask you a question. I did want to ask you both a couple other questions, but we're just gonna limit it to this last one. Um, uh, Talking about your favorite, or even just the most interesting piece that you designed for the line, and even if you just wanted to express an idea for a future piece where you're like, oh, this could be what I want to revisit in the future if we get to keep doing Starforged, would be something like this.
okay
And you can talk about the thing if you want to talk about
Yeah,
the thing.
if you're going to mention
You
like
can-
that,
you can-
you're kind of inviting me.
I
Okay,
am
so-
inviting you to
yeah.
talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, since that's brought up, yeah, and since we just revealed the dome,
Yeah.
I think dome was one of the things I really liked about sculpting Starforged in general. It was like just it was a lot of like geometry puzzles,
Mm-hmm.
like figuring out like how to like get either like angle right, and how do you make the program that I use to be able to like find a good process, because the program I use is a very like more geometrical program because it's used for like more precise.
You use Rhino,
Yeah,
right?
Rhino.
Yeah. All right.
I learned that in architecture school and stuff like that. So it's like a lot about the measurements. It's less about the the sculpting the texture on. So a lot of that's like figuring out like what it's all feels like geometry puzzles kind of. But particular like one of my favorite things geometry puzzles was to figure out like because for the dome I didn't want to just make a curved surface,
Mm-hmm.
and since we had things with a lot of like angular stuff like the hexagon and stuff like that, I was trying to like look at like for example like a soccer ball or something like that. It has all like the
They're like the way the hexagons are stitched together to make the ball. Yeah.
yeah. So I was trying to figure that, but then realized what I want to do is if I take the 45-degree plane that's like the main hexagon of that dome, and then just for each adjacent ones and either rotate it 45 like 15 degrees or rotate 50 degrees sideways and then upwards and outwards, and then I just trim the mesh the surfaces. They kind of solve that problem for me. Yeah, and then since that's done and all, I was thinking about like I wanted to future like expand on that
Yeah.
like if anything like the next step in that would be like a straight dome. I was like trying to think.
Yeah. Something. I said this I think last night, but like one of the interesting things I like about the dome is it's like a variation of the modular roofs we just did in Lowtown. It's volumetrically different, but in its general like construction of the modularity, as well as like how it attaches and then how a whole system would be born from it, is very similar to the modular roof, and I like that. Like it speaks to, especially if we wanted to do glass domes or domes in a fantasy setting, in a more traditional fantasy or even just medieval architecture, we have something already within geometry that we like understand and could utilize, and I like that. And then I know that you've also the tubes were a system, the Tobi tubes were a system that we've talked about and wanted to try to make happen in this project, but were not a thing that was possible at the end of the day, and were a thing that was like, well, when we actually started to work on it more, it absolutely required more pieces to actually make the system robust enough to fit with everything else.
Polish.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah, but like it was but that's the point, is that it's like it needed a little bit more time because it had to have a couple more pieces in it.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it was like, okay, well then why don't we shift this to a future line if we can ever do that, so that we can give it the thing that it needs to give it the strength it needs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eli.
Right. So as far as most challenging for me, I would say, just at least in the sort of purely kind of technical side of it, it's kind of a toss up probably between the dynamo, which has a lot of kind of interesting curves and fins and whatever, and also just trying to make sure I could make it look like an interesting piece and yet have all the attachment points we wanted at the right heights and have it interact with the pipes really well. So that was definitely a challenge. And then the cockpit, that was, kind of visualizing how I wanted that big window to look, again, kind of echoing the polygonal glass or plexiglass or whatever it might be, and how that would interact with the main the metal structure of it. And I had a few versions of it that I liked, but then I realized, well, this was before we knew we'd be able to take the glass off, which I really wanted to do, but I wasn't sure that would be a thing. And I had a different version where after I built it, I realized, jeepers, if the glass is glued on before it's painted, it's going to be really hard to get this underside bit in here, and then everyone's going to hate me. Even if the factory paints it and then puts it together, the people that bought unpainted are going to be like, how the hell am I supposed to get that thing? You can see it through the glass, but I can't paint it.
Yeah.
So I reworked some things for that. Now it turns out you can take it off, which is awesome because I think there's a lot of fun things you can do with the base of it, and probably the glass as well, but certainly the base. So yeah, those two are challenging. As far as future stuff, that's also kind of a double answer. I really kind of want to do some pieces that have, are infected with alien biology, a bit sort of, kind of
Sure.
maybe not necessarily Geiger-esque specifically, but that kind of a feel where like some of the stuff where the vents are a little pushed out and something's oozing out of them, or there's, something that looks like tentacles crawling up the walls or whatever. And it might even be variations on the same set. Yeah, I think that would be really fun to do.
Yeah.
And then there's also a piece that another kind of system. It was almost a kind of a system unto itself. This kind of large, complex piece that I had prototyped out. Was an interesting geometry. It works with the light puck, but it just wasn't practical for, there was no way it was going to fit into the system, and we realized that. And it's just like it's nifty, but it didn't kind of earn the place in the core thing. Where we really needed to make this set as versatile as possible, and kind of just make sure we nailed the two systems. We did do the catwalks and the core pieces. So I'd love to see that.
It was a design that like people are excited by inherently, and it was already a thing too, right? Where like we've gotten some comments about like, oh, is there any light puck compatibility? It's a thing that when we're looking at pieces and when we're looking at designs, I know that you and Saren.
There's my little dog. You want to say hi to the world? Here's my lovely wife Eva and my little girl Saren.
Hello.
Little baby girl.
I just know that you guys put a lot of diligence into like, hey, this is a piece that could also have backwards compatibility with some of the technology we've used when we did the LED wall, when we're doing that window insert wall. A lot of those things come from the place of like, well, I think that this thing is really cool, and I'd like to make a piece that surrounds it because that would also be really cool. And so it's unfortunate anytime we lose something like that because it just helps. It helps everything. So
yeah.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. Oh man. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Sorry if you had anything else you wanted to.
No, I mean I could go on about all the things I'd love to sculpt for sci-fi, but I shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. We don't want to get everybody ideas.
Have to satisfy myself with modding Tyranids for the next little while. I guess.
Yeah. Oh man, I saw this. I showed it to Hamster. There was this guy who was painting Tyranids, and on social media, and sort of posting about it, and was doing this interesting paint scheme where making it like bloodied and like as if it just. But it's got like he took like it looked like some form of glue, or something, and like gluing like just like stringing these like
strands of goopy stuff,
strands of glue over it, and then like dropping little red paint on it so it just like looks like all of this blood over thing. And Hamster and I were both like, oh, that's rad. It's gonna come off on the first day you play. Like I don't feel like I feel like that's just gonna tear itself apart. Like unless this thing is like sitting on the shelf just gathering dust. Like it definitely seems odd.
Yeah, there's some of those things.
It kind of seemed hot gluish. Well, thank you both so much for joining me tonight and for being here to talk a bit about like not only Starforged but just our sort of sculpting processes as especially as they've developed and as they've changed, and maybe changed is a bad word, is just but maybe like just how they
Evolved.
have evolved. Yeah, right. Like this, the
Yeah.
every step of this is you both and Michelle, consistently giving 100,000% of yourselves in your art, and also just making certain that our modularity stays not only visually interesting but geometrically sound. So I want to express my gratitude for both of you in this project, as just bastions of trying to make certain that there was logic to everything, that there was something to have, that there was a reason to have every piece. I don't know, not to get too saccharine on it, but yeah, that was, yeah. It was nice to have both of you along, and I can't wait to keep doing stuff. And thank you all for watching and listening as well. I'm gonna let both of you sign off as well. I'm just wrapping everything up. The supply cache will be revealed tomorrow at noon Eastern Daylight Time, because we are on daylight savings time. So I'm sorry, Rabbit. That might be why you missed out right until you came in right at the last second. But tomorrow again, there will be no kill team. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it, but we will do what we can to make up for that. There will also just be no stream tomorrow as a consequence of that. So we are not going on at any point tomorrow. Going to take the day and get other things done, and get other videos and photos and everything kind of ammunition for the next week. Adepticon's still going strong. We I've been hearing stuff from Chris and Mace that they've just been really excited talking with everybody. So we're pretty excited to hear how the rest of that goes. Yeah, if you guys want to say anything at the end of this, you can come over here and say something if you wanted to. But if you want to say anything, Eli, you have the floor.
Sure. Yeah, just thanks for stopping by, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. There might be one or two things we didn't get to in detail from Discord, and Toby and I are both popping into Discord, so definitely I will try to get to anything that we missed. And feel free to ask more stuff there, or in the comment section on GameFound. And yeah, I guess the last thing I would say is, tell your friends about it. Like this is definitely, you know, we would love this campaign to go as big as it can, and we're feeling like it hasn't reached all the people that might be interested yet. So, if you happen to think of a way to spread the word, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and catch you later.
You want to say anything?
It was really fun to be able to talk about, like the processes behind it and all like the little details from like beginning to end and stuff like that. So yeah, I was looking forward to the stream. And yeah, as Eli said, yeah, we're both on the Discord and I'll be happy to answer questions, even like build out little things for you guys, or just
if we can, yeah.
just chat, yeah.
Oh, and that also encompasses what I'm feeling too. Is like I wish we had a little bit more time to maybe address a couple more questions, but I wanted to kind of keep it even tonight and just shorter and sweeter as it might be. Well, thank you all so much. Have a good night, Merc. We will be in contact about the gift card, and other than that, we will see you next Monday. Our next stream will be Monday, but we will still be doing some updates through the weekend, and we hope you guys all have a great weekend. See you later.